And of course, with us is Symone Baptiste, who directed a film all about reparations, a short film that is received a number of awards. I realize I haven't gone to the comments yet, and I will get to them. So it's been in, Symone, I just have to shout it out. Programmer's Best Narrative Short, Pan-African Film Festival, Best Comedy Short, the Queens World Film Festival, Best Comedy Short, official selection Atlanta Film Festival. It's making the rounds in this virtual moment. It's so good. And I want to play first a clip and then talk to you about it. But Symone, do you want to prep this clip at all before we watch it?
Before the internet eats me. So basically, this is a film about the worst case scenario for reparations and came about because of all of the discourse throughout the 2020 primary race, people talking about reparations, not including Black people in their conversations, so on and so forth. And so myself, Birdie Reed, and Ellington Wells came together. We're a creative team. They co-starred and co-wrote the film. And we just kind of wanted to make something absurd. And so this is where we came at the subject, and we included a numerous amount of people in the comedy space that really, really, I love and enjoy their work. So check them out if you can.
And BT Dubs, I am also in the film at the very, very, very beginning, being the sort of snarky reporter anchor who announces that, yes, reparations have indeed happened, and this is a world in which they have happened. So check it out.
Good stuff, James. Thank you for coming in. Do you want to just sock it to me? Obviously we're all equal now in society, though, so we're not really looking for diversity hires anymore. You're Black, right?
I'm sorry.
I can't quite tell.
The fuck?
Yeah, sorry.
What's wrong with you?
See, some Caucasians have been holding these feelings in for a long time, and now, post-reparations, they've started running their mouths. But there's a solution. Picket fences, the latest app in navigating the Black experience. Simply pull up a white person's profile and give them a 5-star rating from cool to honky.
I'm one of the good ones.
Not anymore, you're not. Thanks, picket fences.
Where can I see this? Where?
Well, you see, Alice really nailed her role, but there's so many lines that we couldn't even put in the film. But I was just dying on set, I think, the whole time, which is a good sign. But yes, we're actually done with our festival route, but Jackie, I'll send you a link if you want to check it out afterwards.
Thank you.
Oh, we got to get that magic Symone link. Yeah, so I wanted, it's so funny, and that is obviously a worst case scenario, going in for a hire and having someone say, well, post reparations, all I see you as is diversity. It's so funny and so real. Why did you want to tackle reparations through comedy? And what has been some of the responses you've gotten?
Yeah, and that scene in particular, beyond it just being the worst case, we wanted to show how capitalism would manifest in this post-reparations world and how people would still find a way to, have this new tech or, find ways to profit off of the moment. And so the reason why we wanted to tackle it through comedy is because it's just very disarming. Going into it, we read articles about how 70% of white people disagree that reparations should be paid out. I was like, that's a steep mountain to climb. And so yes. The way that we figured would be best would be to do it through comedy. And comedy a lot of times comes from a place of pain or truth or, whatever it may be. But I think that it just connects with people on a deeper level sometimes and it allows them to think about things in a new way. So that was kind of the thought process.
Have you ever had a crazy white dude freak out on you after one of the screenings? I know you do sometimes some talk back and you've used it as a political tool as well. Just what have been some of those responses to it?
Yeah, no freaking out, which is good. Maybe people are too embarrassed because of the moment we're in, they're just going to be nice. But I think that overall, I feel like we inoculated ourselves throughout the whole film to show that we were in on the joke, but also that we came from a socialist perspective. The only weird, absurd questions I get are like very sci-fi. Like, what if money didn't exist? And then would we really need reparations? And like, you know, people try to find a way to just find a way to like avoid reparations. And you know, if you want to write a sci-fi novel, let me know. Maybe I can option it and we can make a film.
So funny. Like, I love how people have to go to sci-fi to even imagine that it's possible. Because that's, I mean, 70% is a steep climb. Right now, there's, you know, HR 40, which is a bill in the House that would begin an exploratory committee into reparations, just like, and even that, I remember, caused all these waves, and there was all this backlash to that idea of even beginning to talk about it. What do you feel like it will take to get reparations? And like, what about that steep climb?
Yeah, I mean, we have to avoid just talking about reparations in relation to slavery, because there's plenty of other crimes that we can point to as being worthy of reparations. And I think that's kind of the way to go. Like with the national stage, of course, HR 40 is like a dream, because it's like, you know, it's been around for a while. Like, I think a lot of people also don't know, like, it was first introduced in the 80s. It's just picking up traction again. So, and it's also a study bill. I think that, you know, the people that are behind it also included some provisions, but it is mostly a study bill. So it's just like, you know, that struggle still exists, even to just study reparations. And so that to me just feels like, you know, a long journey, I guess, to go that route. But what I see is like a quicker way is find out, you know, what are some specific things that we can point at, like redlining, like massacres, like, you know, beyond Tulsa, Rosewood, Florida, a couple of years after Tulsa, their descendants, I mean, almost the same story. People who are watching might not know. There was a film made about it in the 90s, Don Cheadle, John Voight. But anyway, so Rosewood, Florida, had a similar massacre. You know, a white woman claimed that she was like beaten up by a black person. Didn't happen. Of course, the white mob came and they burned down the whole town. So their descendants actually did win reparations back in the 90s. And then we just had a complete dry spell until like recently. And I think that we are seeing people strive for reparations in other places. Tulsa has an open lawsuit right now. And then on top of that, you know, Evanston, Illinois. So that's like a big one that just recently happened. And I'm sure we'll get more into that in a second.
No, yeah, I was going to, well, why not right now? I was just going to bring it up that like they're going at it specifically when it comes to redlining and homeownership. So in Evanston, Illinois, which is 16% Black, only 75,000 people, decent sized city, I guess, town. I don't know what it is. It's a town.
It's part of Chicagoland.
It is. It's yeah. So they're basically issuing mortgage assistance to any Black residents who are descendants of individuals who lived, and this is according to them, lived in the city between 1919 and 1969. So pretty recently, and suffered discrimination based on the color of their skin. And it's like part of a broader housing package. So like, it's sort of a way to go about it where you're acknowledging past pain and past discrimination and systems, but then addressing it in a very present day, like, and ergo in housing, this is how we're going to change it.
Yeah.
I don't know. What are your thoughts on that strategy?
I mean, I love it, because I mean, nothing is going to be perfect, but I think that we have to have these things happen in order for it to happen elsewhere. And I think specifically the model of it, having a tax on cannabis, is to me like fitting because of how the Black community has been over incarcerated because of marijuana. And now you have it being legalized all over the country and no reparations for that even. So to me, it's like Chicago was notorious for redlining, as were many other major cities in this country. I'm just thinking like, can we follow that model even here in LA, where cannabis is a huge industry? And I just feel like, to me, because it is tied to something so recent, like you just said, like all the way up until like the late 60s.
Right.
It's so much easier to track that. And I think a lot of Republicans like to say, oh, well, slavery was so long ago, I had nothing to do with that. And then they get away with just acting as if that doesn't have implications on present day. But redlining is one of the implications that came after slavery, and it was because of slavery, you know, and all the systemic racism that existed. So yeah, when I talk about reparations, I tell everyone, get creative. What is like, you know, a crime committed against a group of people that you can ask for restitution for, and it doesn't have to be just slavery.
I would say a fictionalized. If you need to have this science fiction for you, please watch Watchmen on HBO.
That's a good show. I mean, I also
it is brutal and it is incredibly well done. But it is. But if you need your information spoon fed to you with superheroes, please.
Exactly. Do that. No, I mean, it is really interesting because I think we're also revisiting the Reconstruction and, you know, based on like, Reverend William Barber and the Moral Mondays movement and the Poor People's Campaign and just the ways that like the Reconstruction was unfinished, the post-war Reconstruction, the plan to actually create racial and economic equality was like abandoned because of white terrorism and because of the KKK and because of a lack of commitment from on the federal level too. And it's interesting, like we were close. Like there was a time when it was like that 40 acres and a mule. There was a, General Sherman was like, here you go. Like it's going to happen. And then what happened? Like, I'm not sure beyond just what happened to everything, which is promises were broken. But it's funny because your title of your film is $16,000. Was that your present day equivalent of what you imagine could be the worth of like 40 acres and a mule? I feel like it might be more than that.
Actually, $16,000 is the average Black household wealth of today. And so 10 times that is the average white household wealth, of course. And so that was where the number came from. And I'm also sorry to say, like, through our research, we did find like one article that like had the number for reparations that low, even though that's not necessarily where we got the number from, but it was based on like census data and figuring out like what the average household wealth is for a Black family in America. And so, yeah, reparations is essentially like is supposed to close the racial wealth gap if it is true reparations. And of course, 40 acres and a mule is just something that is like folklore in the Black community at this point. It is just like a story that that gets passed down from generation to generation, and it never happens. But it is very much like that dinner table kind of talk. But of course, when that was promised, after the slaves were freed, it was reversed immediately by the next president. So of course, it didn't happen.
Right. And I mean, now it's interesting to see some of the, like, even in the $1.9 trillion, like there's a line item, right, that was, actually supporting Black farmers who've been so disenfranchised in the history of this country since the end of slavery. But it's interesting because it's always posed as like, are you for or against, yes or no? And then the implementation, and it's almost like you let the implementation sort of like stop in a very bad faith way, like stop the whole conversation from moving forward. Yeah, I don't know. What are some of the bad faith and like red herring like ways that people try to say, nah, it's not good, it won't happen? Is it around implementation? Is it around like deciding who gets it? I
think it's usually around like who gets it.
Yeah.
Excuse me. I think like honestly from a lot of conversations with socialists, they say, well, it's not a universal demand, and so we should not pay attention to it. And I reject that because we can talk about particular demands, and there have been other groups of people that received reparations. So why is it like a full stop when we're talking about Black people? Right. And then beyond that, of course, we have people on the right who also are nationalists and believe that reparations should only go to American descendants of slaves, and leaving out like Black immigrants, leaving out everyone who was here, during, during the civil rights era and beyond. And it's so funny because this is not just, white people, this is Black people as well, who also have a perspective of just not wanting anyone, anyone except for American descendants of slaves to get reparations. And so that is, disturbing, because it is very much like reflective of like xenophobic language that we hear from Republicans, and it isn't something that is wide sweeping and would really uplift the Black community. And then a lot of our like civil rights leaders were like half Caribbean, and like, how are you going to divide this up and act as if we didn't have? Yeah,
it's this divide and conquer thing.
Yeah,
they're just trying to. In Milwaukee, and I am from a little town outside of Milwaukee, there's a great book, and my parents lived through it, obviously, when they split the Black community distinctly in half to build the highway. And they did it on purpose because of the civil rights movement, and because of people asking for their rights. And they decimated the Black community for decades. And it is, there's got to be lawsuits in Milwaukee that are available that someone is either working on, because I haven't done it. I haven't lived there since I was a kid, but I mean, Milwaukee is one of the most segregated cities in the country, and the disadvantage, and they literally split the Black community physically because they couldn't do it emotionally fast enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think the other thing is like we start to future trip. And so you already have people like carving out fiefdoms, like you're saying, Symone, people who are like, well, they can't go to Black immigrants. And it's like, whoa. It's not even, it's HR 40 hasn't even passed. It hasn't even passed. And we're already finding ways to demonize one another. I know some of those groups have really shady backing, and being xenophobic and anti-immigrant about it. It's like, oh, cool. The last thing we need is for a reparations push to like create an American nationalism that has like screwed us for so long already.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, to be honest, when we talk about even immigrants, they have a claim to reparations as well, based on what happened during the Trump administration and beyond. Of course, it's leaking into Biden. But it's, we also don't realize that half of people in ICE detention are Black. And they, of course, are over-policed just like anyone else who is Black in this country. So that's why they are overrepresented in ICE detention. And so it's just bonkers to me I always love when people say like, how would a police like approach an African immigrant versus an African American? Is there a different approach? Like do they stop and ask? Do they say, hey, are you actually an immigrant, or are you from here? Because then I'll decide, based on whatever you tell me, I'll decide if I'm going to shoot you in the back like 9 times or something. But I think
Amadou Diallo, the most famous case, Amadou Diallo, an immigrant who was shot 37 times, 40, something awful like that, reaching for the CDs that he was selling on the street. I mean, one of the most linchpin examples, just like George Floyd in that was in New York. But we have to move on. But I really want to, we have to keep talking about this and understanding, like, yes, that racial capitalism and colonialism are legacies that we have not even ended, right? And that's exactly what some of these newer initiatives are aiming at, is that, oh no, it's not in the past, it's now. So how do we also make sure that we're changing the structures that are currently in place now? Have you become a patron yet? Patreon.com/Bitchuation Room is where you can directly support this show and help me make it sustainable so that I can do more of what I do best, doing this.